Originating from Chico State University, welcome to The Real Issue. As we continue our discussion about the California drought, we focus now on ways we can become more water efficient. With rising global temperatures, it is predicted that California will experience more droughts long into the future. Our question tonight is whether or not we can find more efficient ways to use the diminishing water supply and still satisfy the needs of agriculture, the urban areas, and the natural ecosystems. To talk about the opportunities for water savings is Robyn DeFalco, the Executive Director of Butte Environmental Council. I'm happy to have you here with us tonight, Robyn.
Thanks for having me.
So, Robyn, you believe that we can become more water efficient. Give us an overview about the amount of water you think possible in savings in terms of, if we change our behavior and maybe if we improve our infrastructure.
Sure. Well, a recent statewide analysis done by the Pacific Institute and the Natural Resources Defense Council estimates that up to 14 million acre-feet of water annually could be saved if we implement a number of conservation and efficiency strategies, as well as recycling and water capture. That's enough water to provide water for all California cities, and it really would solve our problem. So it's not that we have a water supply problem right now, we have a water demand problem, and if we adjust our demands to live within our means, we could solve California's water crisis.
Well, let me ask you, you said we could save between changing our behavior and maybe upgrading our infrastructure. We could save 14 million acre-feet of water. I have no idea what an acre-foot is. So help me to understand what kind of savings you're talking about.
Sure. So one acre-foot is water volumetric terminology, and imagine one football field with 1 foot of water deep. That is also the equivalent of about one 4-person family consuming water for 1 year. So just imagine 14 million acre-feet could be conserved if we had all of our policies implemented and if we were all doing our part.
14 million families a year. We're going to come back to that number at the end of this conversation, but I want to jump right in and start to talk about where that savings can happen. I'd like to start with agriculture, because according to the California Department of Water Resources, agriculture uses about 80% of the human use of water, and then that extra 20% is urban uses. So talk us through how changes in agricultural practices could start saving some water.
Sure. Of course, California is a big ag state, and ag is a really important aspect of our economy, and of course we all need to eat. The study that I mentioned earlier indicates that up to 20%, ag could save up to 20% of their water consumption by implementing some modern irrigation techniques. Now, ag has already done a lot, so the challenging part is how can they get further with their ag efficiency, water efficiency, and conservation. 20% would be a lot statewide, and there's a lot of controversy and debate about whether that is achievable given how much conservation has already happened without impacting crop and profits. So the drought may force some ag producers into shifting crops because it may become too high risk. Right now, a lot of high value crops are also high risk crops, but when that risk becomes not worth it, they may decide to shift practices.
And when you talked about high risk crops, are you talking about the permanent orchards? So for example, you can't not water your orchard in 1 year, so that's the kind of high risk you're talking about.
An annual crop like tomatoes, you can fallow and not if you don't have enough water for the year. But an orchard, whether it's nuts like almonds or citrus, that's almonds is a 35-year commitment, so you're making a big capital investment, and you've got to have that payoff for a high-value crop like almonds, which are also a high export crop, and right now the price is very high. So those patterns may start to shift if there isn't sufficient water.
And I know that water prices for agriculture is going up. I think it's the highest it's been in quite some time. When we talk about upgrades to irrigation systems, for example, I'm wondering how how do we pay for that? It sounds like it's going to be a costly effort, and quite honestly, 80% of the water goes to agricultural uses, and 80% of agricultural production is exported. And so when we talk about exports for farmers, we're talking about profit for the particular farmer. It's not profit for the common good per se. And so I'm wondering, how would we expect to pay for those kinds of upgrades? I'm not sure if the average taxpayer would like to see their taxes going to upgrades for a private company.
Well, our taxes are certainly subsidizing water transport around the state of California currently. I'm really not sure the costs, Sue, but farmers will need support as they transition to new industries. And some in the ag industry are already talking about the need to adapt. They recognize that importing water from elsewhere is not a sustainable model in the long term. Driscoll's, for example, is one of the large berry producers in California, your strawberries and your blueberries that you enjoy at the supermarket. They've come out as a leader calling for bold water policy reform in California, realizing that if they don't have water available, their business will suffer.
I want to move on to the 20% that the human uses. The interesting part that I've learned about these larger cities is that over the last 30, 40 years, we've seen this huge increase in population. LA, San Jose. But it's interesting because there hasn't been a corresponding increase in water. And so I'm wondering if you could, before we talk about how we shift today, what happened back in the 70s, for example, that allowed that increase in population but not the corresponding water demand?
Sure. Well, communities like Los Angeles actually have done a pretty good job with conservation, and I would attribute much of that to public outreach campaigns. Now, across California, water use varies a lot per capita per day. You've got the coastal communities that are wetter and cooler, use as little as 50 gallons per capita per day, whereas the inland communities in the valley or the mountains, hotter and drier, use more and also have bigger ag industries as well. So that variation has been a challenge for measuring, but the communities that have done a good job with conservation have really emphasized public outreach. We had great public outreach campaigns back in the 70s, and some communities today have done a great job promoting water conservation and enforcing it, even having water education classes for those who get fined or get warnings for misuse of water in their neighborhoods. Santa Clara County, for example, right now has a great Brown is the New Green campaign, so that folks who are letting their lawns go dry can feel proud that they're doing their part to help the California drought. Whereas up here in the North State, I know my own community of Chico, there's been almost no messaging about the importance of of water conservation. And I have folks calling my organization, calling my office saying, I'm letting my lawn go brown and my neighbors are giving me a hard time about it. Where's the community acceptance of the need to conserve at this time?
So what I'm understanding is, in terms of getting folks to recognize and change their behavior, it's, I won't say simply, but it's a strategic PR effort for the local city. And so that PR effort also, what were those efforts calling for? Was it simply the low flow showers and the, throw the brick in your toilet to keep that water from, filling up so high?
Sure. Well, with the emergency drought regulations that the governor has put into place in 2014 and 2015, there are specific mandated conservation that everyone has to do. So you can't water your car in your driveway and just let the hose run. You have to have a shutoff valve on it, a nozzle. You now in restaurants, they're not supposed to serve water unless you ask for it. That's a very small impact in terms of total water consumption, but it's the visible thing that we all recognize every day. One of the latest is the water agencies will now have to impose some sort of mandate that you could only water your landscaping 2 times a week, and each community will roll that out on their own.
So Robyn, I want to kind of move into sort of the ideas that I just don't understand, and I find them a little bit weird. So this is perfect that you're here. One of the ways that two of the ways that we can reduce demand is through treating our wastewater, which again, it sounds a little icky to me. Also storm capture. And so let's start with reusing our wastewater. First, explain exactly, when you said brown is the new green, I thought, I don't want to go there, but we'll go there. So what does it mean to reuse our wastewater, and is it safe, and what can we use it on, all that stuff?
Sure. Well, recycled water got a really bad name with toilet to tap as the catchphrase.
Ooh, that's bad PR.
Right, it is. But think about it. All of our water has been recycled over millennia on Earth, right? And the natural water cycle filters our water to clean and pure conditions that we are happy to drink. The modern water treatment plant can also clean that water clean enough for anything you might want to use it for, whether it's drinking or even clean enough and pure enough for computer chip processing. So there are secondary levels of treatment and tertiary levels of treatment. Now, why would we water our golf courses and fill our swimming pools with drinking water, right? We need that water to be clean enough for those purposes, but we don't need to flush our toilets with clean, pure drinking water. So secondary recycled water is perfectly good for those uses, and some communities have a secondary pipe system set up. The purple pipe would say non-potable for irrigation only, and some communities are doing a great job with that. It also is more energy efficient because that water doesn't necessarily have to be transported across the state. It can be reused locally and transported shorter distances. So water recycling is one of the best infrastructure improvements we can make. We have made leaps and bounds in terms of investing in water recycling in the past decade, but there's so much more we can do. And when you look at recent investments such as the water bond that was passed a year ago, we did not put enough money in there for the kinds of water recycling that I think we need to be doing on the large scale.
Robyn, I have to say I'm a little surprised that you say that, because I was under the assumption that Butte Environmental Council did not support the water bond.
Precisely because it didn't have enough funding for those alternative strategies. The funding in the water bond was largely for what I would call last century thinking. Now, the other kind of solution that you just mentioned was stormwater capture. Now, there are a couple of different kinds of water storage, and with decreasing snowpack, water storage can take the form of a reservoir, surface water being stored outdoors. It can also take the form of collecting rainwater off your roof and gutters and for use on site locally. Now, the big water reservoir, for example, one proposed in the North State is Sites Reservoir in Colusa and Glenn counties. And the politicians love this one. They treat it like it's the panacea for all of our water woes, because if we can just store that water, we'll have it when we need it in a drought. But Sites Reservoir would siphon water off the Sacramento River, which doesn't have a lot of surplus water, especially not now. And if we continue to have this ongoing cycle of droughts, where's the surplus water that's going to fill that reservoir? They still have not made that project pencil out economically, and I don't think that it will. But the smaller scale water capture projects that anyone can do at their own home or on a bigger scale for a commercial development, a big campus, or even a municipality would be collecting rainwater off roofs and gutters and then using it on site primarily for landscaping purposes.
It seems like there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be created. And again, I'm always asking, well, who's going to pay for this? How is this going to happen? I know that as we build things, it's good for the economy, and so I want to go back to the treatment of wastewater. And you mentioned earlier, you said we've had leaps and bounds in terms of investment. Can you give us some examples of communities that have done it? I mean, as I listened to you, I thought, this is building a new city. This is building, a parallel universe where we actually have one tap for drinking water and we have a different tap for wastewater, treated wastewater. Yeah. So So talk about who's doing this.
Yeah. Los Angeles is a great example.
Really?
Back in the 80s, you might remember all the stories about the sewage just going right out into the bay and the water contamination problems. Well, they realized that they needed to get on top of that, and since then have completely turned it around. I was recently reading about West Los Angeles. There's a water treatment plant that's doing what they call designer water, and they're marketing it. Designer water that's clean for your pool. It's for special uses like industrial manufacturing, like I mentioned, computer chips. And so they can tailor their water treatment to the customer's needs. So that's just a great example of water pollution in the ocean turned into a really valuable resource that's helping Los Angeles meet its water supply needs.
Mm-hmm. And then, okay, so we did the wastewater treatment. And then I want to go further into that water capture. Again, as you mentioned, we stored water for a very long time in the snow, in the snowpack. And we're down at this year, we're at 7% snowpack. We're in a lot of trouble this summer, and I'm not sure if anybody can predict what's going to happen. So is there a way, like you don't particularly support the proposed site's reservoir, how do we capture appropriately the water that would melt for the summertime use, but is coming down as rainfall at this point? Would you say that there are any particularly good sites? Instead of site to reservoir, is there a better site?
In California-wide, one of the best surface water storage solutions that I've heard proposed is Tulare Lake down in Central California. And that one is supported by the Environmental Water Caucus as being feasible and restoring what used to be the largest lake in California. So there are certain places where surface water storage would be a better fit than Sites Reservoir, for example. But you're right, the loss of the snowpack is really devastating, and the climate scientists are predicting that we're not going to see the snow return in the quantities that it used to in California. There's a lot of talk about whether more trees or fewer trees will cause more snow to stick to the ground, but the fact of the matter is it's not falling out of the sky to the degree that it used to. And we are seeing increased flooding as that snow melt happens faster and earlier than it otherwise would. And that's a big challenge for California at this point. I don't think we have all the solutions figured out for that yet.
It's interesting because I'm not sure if we even know what the problem is yet. And what I mean by that is, as you mentioned, we're going to have flooding that maybe we didn't know. We couldn't predict that flooding, so of course we couldn't prepare for it. So we have a lot going for us. A lot of challenges ahead. So let's take it to the personal level in terms of rainwater catchment. You said off of your roof you can do it. Somebody mentioned to me not too long ago, and I found it a little hard to believe, that to do rainwater catchment from your roof is illegal. If you could debunk that or confirm it.
In some communities it is. And if you imagine the profit gained by a water agency that sells you your water to your tap, they're not eager for you to get your water from somewhere else. And these policies seem crazy, but if you think about it in those terms, it makes sense that somebody would work to have a rule that prevents you from capturing your own rainwater.
Yeah.
In our community in Butte County, it is allowed, and we've been doing some workshops, some DIY workshops, do-it-yourself, for folks that want to do that at their home and provide a little supplemental water for their gardens and landscaping. We've been doing it at schools. We've installed rain barrels at 6 schools throughout Butte County so far, and we're offering that to any teachers that are interested. First come, first serve. We do a few in the spring and a few in the fall. And it's really a great educational opportunity for those young students to see that it is feasible, that it's really quite simple technology. Rain comes off your roof, goes in the gutter, goes down the spout into the barrel. When the barrel is full, you water your garden with a hose. It's all gravity fed. And then we do a math exercise to teach the kids how to calculate how much water given the annual rainfall.
A lot of what I see happening with Butte Environmental Council and all the groups across Butte County, across the North State, all over really. I remember back when recycling was a new idea. And I recycled. I always recycled. I thought, it sounds like a good idea. And I remember my dad saying, it doesn't make any difference. If you recycle one thing, it doesn't make any difference because I don't. And I thought, this is about changing the attitude. It's changing my relationship with waste. And so I'm wondering, when you work with children about rainwater catchment, do you see that changes, and what do you predict will happen in the next 20 years as these 8-year-olds become functioning adults in our community?
Right. The kids absolutely do get it. We do some great exercises with them about who gets how much water in California, and then they buy and sell the water from each other, and they negotiate. And some of them go for profit, and some of them go for the common good, but it's really educational for them, and they really do get it. Other communities that are water poor, like Australia, for example, are so far ahead of us, and they have experienced their own droughts, and they adapted, and they have implemented conservation and efficiency measures, and they have learned to do with less water because they don't have it. So when they come and tour California, they have commented, wow, you guys have a lot of work to do, and your leadership is not steering you in the right direction. So while I'm happy to see the governor's drought declaration and the new restrictions, we are still lagging far behind in terms of the leadership that we need to see at the state level and at our local communities. So we're not going to get there unless we have that kind of push from our leaders, and to have our leaders emphasizing the importance of conservation and efficiency. So that's my greatest concern, is we're not going to get there unless we have that leadership.
Well, to go back to the comment about Australians that come to this country and say, oh, you're so far behind, on the one hand, it's a very depressing comment. On the other hand, it sounds like an observation, and it underscores what you're saying, is that there is so much opportunity for us to really take action and to really take responsibility and to take control of our own situation in terms of the water. So Robyn, I want to take it even lower. Let's take it to the personal level. What can I do in my house? We talked about lawns, use treated wastewater for my lawn, but talk about from the person that doesn't know anything to the person that's pretty savvy in water conservation.
Sure. Well, studies indicate that for the average Californian in a suburban community, your water consumption, your water use, is up to 50% of your total water use is outside for irrigation and landscaping. So if you just look at that 50%, your lawn, cutting back on watering it only 1 or 2 days a week, or remove that lawn and replace it with some drought-tolerant landscaping, or remove most of it. So drought-tolerant landscaping is the way of California. This is not England, and we don't have that kind of rainfall for lush green lawns. Then if you look indoors, the remaining 50% of your water consumption comes, of course, from your dishwasher, your toilet, your showers. So, for example, taking shorter showers, a 5-minute shower, that should be the goal. And you can get a little timer in your shower to help remind you, how am I doing? And do your best every day. Your toilet and your dishwasher and your washing machine, those appliances can be swapped out. Usually there are rebates available. Check in your community. With the low flow version, or the Water Wise, just like Energy Star for your electrical appliances, look for the Water Wise logo, and they use so many fewer gallons without compromising the functionality of the toilet or the dishwasher, because you want your dishes to get clean and you want your toilet to flush. So if we swap out those appliances, that's great, but new appliances cost a lot of money, right? So there are a lot of little things that you can do. In your shower, you can take a bucket and just let the excess water fall in the bucket. Then you use that extra 5 gallons of water to water your landscaping or to wash your dishes later. In your toilet, if you do have an old water hog toilet, the back of the tank does not need as much water as is there. You can put a brick or a bottle of water or even a bag filled with water, and that displaces the amount of water that your toilet is consuming per flush. So that's a really easy, no-cost solution for conserving water in the home. And of course, just don't let that tap run continuously. In communities that don't have water readily available, the idea that we would just let the tap run while we're washing dishes or brushing our teeth or washing our hands is unfathomable to them, because when water is such a precious resource that you have to walk 5 miles to get it, you wouldn't squander it that way. But we turn on the tap and there it is, like magic, and we do take it for granted.
One of the many of the things that you said, put a bucket in your shower, my first reaction is, well, it won't make any difference, one bucket. But I guess if everybody is doing that bucket, and that leads us really to this final part of our conversation. Robyn, NASA just came out with a report that said California has 1 year left of water. I don't know exactly how they have quantified that. I don't know what exactly that means, 1 year left of water. Let me ask you, are you hopeful at all, based on what you've shared with us about how the opportunities that we have to be more water efficient? Do you have any hope that we're going to make this transition?
I'm very concerned that before we make that transition, our groundwater supplies continue to deplete. It's imperative that we make the transition to using less water. And in the meantime, the time to conserve water and the time to have an outreach campaign is in the years before the drought. So we have surplus water saved up. So we've got to do everything we can now to save water, and at least the drought will wake some people up to doing that.
And everybody needs to be involved in this effort.
Absolutely. Ag and urban users, we've all got to do our part.
Robyn DeFalco, I appreciate the work that you do. I appreciate the work that you do in Butte Environmental Council. I know that you're working very hard to protect our water, to educate our community, and to look after our water supply. I appreciate it. Thanks for being here on this important topic.
Thanks.
And this concludes our 5-part series on the California drought. Now it's time for you to take action. Visit www.saveourwater.com to find out what you can do to make a difference. And thanks for tuning in.